Okay, Lisa, what do you think? Luisa, sorry, what do you think? Shall we start?
It depends on what you say.
I mean, all
Hey, really, I am ready. Is
Okay.
somebody who is missing?
No, it's Mark, Mikel, and Paul are here. So I think we should start, and then.
What about Javier?
Javier is also here.
Is okay. All right. So, do you want me to start?
Yeah, maybe I can do a little bit of presentation, and I can present you if it's okay.
Okay, fine. So, shall I leave my? I have my microphone on,
Yeah,
but
and have
not my camera.
No, have your camera on so we can be the two of us.
Okay.
I'm going to. Okay, so welcome to the last session of the conference. Has been a really interesting two previous sessions about the history of forced migration, forced displacement in Europe yesterday, and this morning about the sociological approach to refugees. And now we are moving to the third main element of this project, apart from history and apart from the sociological approach, which is technology, with a roundtable called Cultural Heritage and Digital Media, building synergies among H2020 projects. So the idea of this panel was to put together and generate a debate among partners and people coming from the other H2020 projects that were awarded in the same topic as So Close, in order to discuss and to debate ideas, technological approaches, and this kind of digital environment and tool environment that it's a key part of all the projects that are gathered here. So Luisa, whenever you want to start, please, just a technical comment, as in the other sessions. Please turn off the mics and turn off the cameras while the presentations are taking part. And after that, if you wanna intervene in the debate, just write it down in the session chat, and Luisa and I will be checking, and we will be organizing the intervention. So Luisa, whenever you want.
Thank you, Miguel. I'm delighted to chair this session, which I really consider one of the cores of So Close project. And it's very convenient that we are using a medium coherent with the content of our roundtable, more perhaps than it would have been if we had been face to face. So first of all, let me introduce to you the components of this panel. First is Paul Mulholland of the Open University, who is presenting the SPICE project. SPICE meaning social cohesion, participation, and inclusion through cultural engagement. And then Michele Zorriglia, Director of Digital Media at Vicomtech, who is presenting the Traction project. And Marc Hernandez, founder of La Tempesta, Universitat Politècnica de Catalunya, who will talk about tool categorization in So Close. Thank you. So we can just start, and can I give the word to Paul? Oh, mind you, we are supposed to have, each of you will have 10 minutes. Is this all right for your presentation?
Yes, that's fine. Thanks. Yes.
Go ahead, please.
Okay, I will try and share my slides. Okay. Are my slides visible?
Yes, yes, it is.
Yes. Okay, so a quick introduction. The SPICE project was awarded in the same topic as So Close. We only started on the 1st of May, and we're a consortium of 4 museums, 3 technology companies, and 8 universities, and coordinated by Bologna and CNR in Italy. So a key focus for SPICE is to develop tools and methods to support something we describe as citizen curation. So this involves two interrelated processes. First, we want to help citizens to develop their own interpretations of cultural objects, for example, building stories or collections or exhibitions. And then secondly, we want to help citizens to reflect on those interpretations that are produced and be able to look at similarities and differences in perspective across and within different groups as a way of understanding their own perspective and appreciating the perspective of others. So citizen curation is about bringing curatorial methods to citizens. So in the same way citizen science brings scientific methods to citizens. It's enabling people to share their own interpretations, a way of bringing multiple voices into the museum rather than just the authoritative view. We want to be inclusive and adapt to different citizen groups. And we want this process of looking within and across groups to promote kind of empathy, understanding, and social cohesion. And we want the whole system to be almost like a laboratory for research, where museums can find out how their collections can help people to think in new ways. So we have various case studies in Finland. They are looking at older people and how they can connect artifacts in the design museum to personal artifacts they've got in their own homes, and to use that to span generations. The Irish Museum of Modern Art are focusing on people less able to visit the museum physically, such as asylum seekers and children with serious illnesses, and looking at how people can share kind of personal themes related to art, such as the family, and look for similarities and differences. At the Natural History Museum in Spain, they're looking at using kind of games and puzzles to explore different opinions around the kind of environment and ecology. In Italy, they're developing an app that will enable deaf people to create and share their interpretations of artworks. So a key assumption here is that someone who is deaf has more visual attention, and therefore might often see things in visual artworks that hearing people miss. So they can share those stories, and hearing people can get an insight into what perhaps they can see and the hearing people miss. And at the Hecht Museum in Israel, we will be working with different religious and secular communities, helping them to express and share their opinions, and look for similarities and differences. So in terms of the technology, so the current system that you probably find in many museums, there's a collection management system that's used internally. This may power some kind of website, but this isn't for collecting visitor contributions. The museum may export data, for example, to Europeana, and they may use social media, but there's a lot of evidence that social media is often not very well suited to engaging with people. It tends to work more for broadcasting. So what we want to do in SPICE is we have this concept of a kind of linked data server, a kind of data node that any museum or organization can set up. This can link to the collection management system, it can have its own kind of taxonomies and vocabulary, and it can have scripts that define activities that citizens can do, such as storytelling and collecting. Citizen contributions can be managed within the server. It will have its own search and browsing functionality, and can potentially connect to other platforms, such as social media and Europeana. These linked data servers can be linked together, so each server can choose how to share data with other ones. So different museums and groups can have their own server, and they can each have their own repositories, taxonomies, activities, and other functionalities. Inside each of those servers, each will have a set of scripts that define these activities that citizens can take part in, that involves some combination of interpretation and reflection activities. So in terms of interpretation, the kinds of things we're looking at is helping people to build collections, to analyze artifacts, and to take part in other curatorial activities. And we want to build activities that can either be very lightweight or more involved, more engaged. So, for example, a collection could be built just by somebody's dwell time as they walk around an exhibition in a very lightweight way. Or somebody could, say, actively take part in a treasure hunt, kind of collecting information and building the collection that way. So I think for each of these types of activities, we'll have lightweight and engaged ways in which citizens can be involved. And then same for the kind of reflection activities, we want to come up with, for example, ways of, if somebody's interpreted an object, suggesting alternative interpretations of the same object. And we want to develop visualizations to help people look at similarities and differences across different groups of people. And what we particularly want to focus on is showing that within some particular group of people, there's a lot of variety of opinion. People are not all the same in that group. And also to visualize, there's often lots of similarities across different groups. So, for example, people from different cultures, they still have similar experiences of things like bereavement and marriage and coming of age that can be shared and understood. So the technology design process, we want to co-design with the communities from the beginning, starting with paper and working our way up to technology. All the tools will support all of the local languages of our case studies, English, Italian, Spanish, Finnish, and Hebrew, and all our interfaces will have built-in accessibility so that we can attract a wider range of citizens as possible. For example, use of text-to-speech and text magnification facilities. So, in summary, we're developing technology to support this process we call citizen curation, where different organizations or museums can have their own linked data server. They can choose how to share that data. Each server supports its own activities for interpretation and reflection. And we're going to co-design these with the user communities, and central to it will be accessibility supports. Right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed, Paul. It was a very interesting presentation. I particularly appreciate the attention for alternative interpretations, relationships within the collectivity you are referring to, the respect for local languages. All this goes into the direction of a visual attention which creates a form of open collectivity. I am engaged with the House of European History, the museum created, historical museum created by the European Parliament. And indeed, until now, the museum had 5 floors of permanent collection. But now we are developing a 6th floor, which will exactly go in the direction in which you are going, trying to create interactions not only between the museum and the visitors, but among the visitors themselves. So I think it's a precious experience you're doing, and we can discuss it later, but I now give the word to Mikel. Mikel, are you?
Yes,
Mikel,
yes,
are you ready?
Yes, I'm trying to share my screen. Can you follow now my presentation?
Please go.
Okay. So I'm very happy to be in this conference. I think it's very good to have, these very interesting projects all together and have this discussion. And I'm going to present the overview of our project, which is the Traction project, an H2020 project. And Traction comes from Opera Co-Creation for a Social Transformation. So I am as you can see, my name is Miquel Zorrilla. I'm the head of a digital media department in Bicomtech, which is a research institute located in San Sebastian, and we do applied research in different fields like multimedia, advanced interaction, visual computing, computer graphics, and computer vision, and so on. I'm also the head, the project coordinator of the Traction project, and that's what I'm going to summarize in 10 minutes. What our goals, which are our objectives, and what we are looking for, the impact we are looking for with the Traction project. So this slide summarizes the ecosystem. What is the consortium, and who are the stakeholders of the Traction project? The project started at the very beginning of this year, and it's going to be until the end of 2022, so 3 years of project. And as said, I'm from Bicomtech, and we are coordinating the project. And we have like 3 different trials that I will explain later, but they are driven by 3 opera houses or opera-related organizations. So on the one hand, we have Liceu, an opera theater, an opera house for a long years in Barcelona. We have also Irish National Opera, which is a very young company that it's also with a very different structure from Liceu, but also providing opera and bringing opera to all Ireland. And we have also SAMP in Leiria, in Portugal, which is an art school that work, among others, with opera representations with different collectives, like in hospitals, like in prisons, and so on. And they collaborate a lot with the Gulbenkian Foundation. We have also in the consortium the UAB, a university, and they are experts in accessibility, in user testing, providing evaluation methodologies, and that's the role in the project. And we have also Virtual Reality Ireland. They provide immersive experiences, 360 content, virtual reality content, and so on. And we have different technological centers and also universities, such as Bicomtech ourselves, CWI, which is another research institute located in Amsterdam, and Dublin City University, which is in Dublin, and they work also in providing technology. And finally, we have François Matarazzo, that is an expert in participatory art and community art, and he's located in UK. So we have 5 different countries in Europe represented by 9 organizations in Traction. And we are creating an international advisory team. We will announce the name very soon in the website. They will advise us in an overall way in the project, and then we are creating a local advisory teams in the trials that I would explain later in Barcelona, in Leiria, and Ireland, to be more in touch with the specific activities that we are doing on each one of the locations. But before that, I want to explain the motivation and why we are why we are doing a project like Traction. And on the one hand, there is the inequality, which is a defining issue in the time where we are. And that sets the ground for the easy promises of populists and so on that seem to be attractive in the context where we are. And on the other hand, we have the European values, no? In the European cultural place, and where the European values were something to protect and very relevant, seems to be now like in danger or in risk, or we feel the need to really preserve them. And in this context, the opera is unavoidable in the middle of everything, because opera is passion, opera is drama, opera is a mixture of different disciplines of art and so on. But today, the typical spectator of the opera, regarding some studies, is a 54-year-old woman with higher education who travels by car and spends more than 150 euros on one evening. So we are in danger to have opera like the symbol of this European inequality. So in this context, we want to renew opera and to make it once again the root of the living culture that it was, and completely rewrite all the languages of opera and make it closer to the citizens. So the challenges we are addressing in the project, first of all, we want to involve all the citizens in this creative process and to be part of this opera. And how to do that? With co-creation, with participatory art, and with this kind of initiatives. And we want to prioritize those who are currently more marginalized or ignored or not existing with the opera. Like, for example, the migrants, the poor people living outside of dominant cities that don't have access to opera theaters and so on, people with disabilities, and at the end of the day, a majority that it's not linked with the opera. And we want to empower those communities and become owners with all rights to be part of this opera and to express their version of the European values. So for that, we think we need to release completely a new form, a new language, a new format, completely something different. And opera has to be, with brave experiments, something completely different, and extend that not only in opera but also to other kind of arts or performances. And for that, the third challenge is that we must embrace new technology. We think that's a key aspect, because this technology will enable us to achieve the two aforementioned challenges. So how technology can help in the co-creation process, how the technology can completely create novel formats and novel ways to involve the audience, to interact with them, and to really have them within the story of the opera and what you are saying. So in these challenges, well, it's not the ambition of Traction. We are not naive in that sense of thinking that we are going to solve all the challenges and all the problems we said, but at least we want to put the arrow in the right direction and do a step forward in this thing. So we know that our project is experimental and not everything will work, but at least we are very committed to share all the knowledge regarding this process and try to disseminate all the impact and the social impact and so on that we learn in this experience, so others could follow the path or the way that we are creating here. So in our vision, we want to create a bridge between the opera professionals, like in Liceu, like in Irish National Opera, like in SAMP and so on, and different communities, like migrants, like, as I said, people which is not, in rural areas or something like that, in prisons and so on, and create this kind of bridge and foster a community dialogue between them towards a co-creation and a co-design of new representations. So we want to work on researching, designing, and developing new tools that will help to do this co-creation and this participatory, interactive representations, and also define and implement a methodology, which will be a community-centric evaluation methodology that will help us to then replicate and be able to do it with other art representations in the future, with other communities, with other kind of organizations. So, as I said from the beginning, we have 3 different trials, and I'm going to explain very shortly because we don't have a lot of time, but like a brief summary of what's going on each one of the trials. So on the one hand, Liceu wants to create a community opera from zero with the Raval neighborhood. Raval is a very diverse neighborhood in Barcelona. There is a lot of diversity, a lot of cultures, migrants, a lot of languages spoken, and a very, very broad view of the cultural heritage and so on. So they want to co-create an opera involving professionals and involving very, very different organizations and participants and individuals that are in the neighborhood to create together an opera. On the other hand, we have in Leiria SAMP that want to create also an opera from zero with inmates in a prison in Leiria. SAMP has worked in the prison previously, doing other representations on opera and so on, but now they want to co-create something from zero, deciding all the things of the opera with those inmates, and their objective is, thanks to this opera, thanks to this community work, they want to lower the rate of criminal recidivism among young inmates and try to incorporate them in this cultural approach and so on. And finally, Irish National Opera wants to bring a digital opera, a technological opera to all Ireland, which is also very diverse. I mean, it's not the same Dublin or small towns across the island. So they want to use new technologies, immersive formats, virtual reality, 360 technologies, and explore a new way of representing a novel format of opera that will reach all the audience and that will enable an enriched interaction. So to summarize, which are the objectives of the project? First of all, to promote through their empowerment a transformation of those communities that are not integrated or used to be part of these opera representations. Second, which is more related to the technology, establish a novel workflow with this technology to make an effective and collaborative co-creation, participatory and co-design productions and so on. The third one more related to the methodology, which is lay down a community-centric research and evaluation methodology so we can measure, we can conduct an efficient community dialogue that will be replicable in the future with other communities, with other art representations. The fourth one, more related to those novel audiovisual formats, explore those formats that could extend traditional representations with technology or that could bring a completely digital representation and innovative in that sense. And as I said, our commitment with maximizing all the impact, all the social impact, all the market impact, disseminate what we learn, disseminate what we do so others can follow this work in the future. So I had other slides that I include in the summary that was disseminated. So in the questions, if there are specific questions about the technology, about different aspects in the trials, we can go to that. But I wanted to be just in time and give a brief overview of what we are doing in the project. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm here for your questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Mikael. I am really elated by your project. It's wonderful. And I hope you will have a chance of showing us the other slide you have. I just wanted to mention that during the pandemic, we had the chance to have opera on streaming from Metropolitan Museum, New York, Metropolitan Opera in New York, l'Opéra de Paris, La Scala. That was wonderful. But it was still, as you said, the format was still the same. It was, of course, it was free, which is a great novelty. But the format you alluded to, the sort of transformation of the format, of course, was not possible. So we'll talk about this. Thanks very much indeed. And now I give the word to Mark. Mark Hernandez, are you ready?
Yes. Hi, good morning.
Please go ahead. Please.
There's someone playing music in the background.
No.
Can you? Yeah.
I cannot hear any music.
Yeah, there is like a soundtrack in. I think it might be like kind of. You don't hear? Okay.
No, I don't hear either, Mark.
We cannot hear it, but perhaps it is your personal soundtrack.
Okay. Okay, I will start. Sorry for that. Okay, so I will share my screen. Okay. Yes. Okay. There we go. So, my name is Marc Hernandez. I am the founder of La Tempesta, and also very happy to be here. Thank you, Luisa, for your kind moderation, and also welcome our brother projects of Traction and Spice, which we are very happy to be sharing the experience. Although it's a short experience, many of our projects have already started, but in our case, it's been like 6 months. We started in January, and half of the time we've been under the COVID crisis. So well, we just giving our first steps. So our project, So Close, as many of you already know, promotes social cohesion around forced migrations through the incorporation of co-created digital cultural heritage tools, so that past and present migrations can be expressed creatively and shared in all its human knowledge dimensions. So we finally look for social cohesion, working with migrants' heritage and experiences expressed in digital ways. Our project gives a lot of importance to co-creation, specifically following a series of methods to gather all this content that will be expressed in digital sharing tools also. And we will have like 4 pilots in Poland, Greece, Spain, and Italy, where we will be able to test all these methods and sharing tools. So it will be a project that will really be a practical and not only theoretical. We are very happy to have and proud to have this great consortium with us, coordinating the UAB, Universitat of Barcelona, Javier Rodrigo, the IP, and then we have partners in Lund University in Sweden. We have Viladicios in Poland. We have Fondazione Scuola di Pace di Montesole in Italy. We have the Museo Memorial de l'Exili in Catalonia, in Spain, the MUME. And then we have Third, Engineering, and Tempesta as the technological partners. Third is from Greece, Engineering is from Italy, and Tempesta is from Catalonia, Spain. And then we have also very important the refugee organization, the Greek Forum of Refugees, with us. So the building blocks in So Close technology is specifically basically working in a digital toolbox, okay, that will involve different tools that we will see now in the next slides, and then be able to create also 3 digital heritage sharing tools that we also will comment. We plan to use also, this is more in the field of Third, social media crawlers and semantic services to also be able to link all the information in a proper way. And the last point is the Memory Center project that will be the final repository of all this content that we'll gather. And then this content and this platform, will also allow to reformulate and also create new content from this gathered information. This is meant to be also like the preservation repository of the project in order to still be active after the end of the project. So all these elements, of course, depend on a very important concept, which is the interoperability. It's very important that the sharing tools talk through the APIs, the project interfaces with the Memory Center platform, and all this is key, and it's paramount to be able to coordinate all the technological elements. We also have a media asset manager that will be the multimedia muscle also of the project, that will gather all the digital objects, pictures, audios, videos, 360 videos, 3D scans, etc., etc. So interoperability is for us very, very important. And then I will talk now also about, we are meant to build a lot of tools, but what we've done also is like to try to understand how to address these tools. The project has a singularity, is something very special, that is, there are not predefined tools that we have to build, but they will result from a co-creation process, as I said. So specifically, the contents that we will gather will respond to a method that refugees and cultural organizations will be defining. And finally, all this content will be expressed through the sharing tools. But then it's very important to know exactly what's the usage of these tools, the paradigms that which the tools will be under, the environments where these tools will be used, being a workshop in the case of the Cohesion tools, or being the World Wide Web in the sharing tools, or being social media, the technologies that they will involve, and the devices that we will use, and also the forms or types of these tools, and the specific qualities that the project is asking of these tools to have. So this is quite a very synthetic way of expressing that, but we have all the user needs and the base of user data in the bottom of this pyramid, and we are using interviewing tools to gather all this information. And then also some co-creation methodologies will define the exact gathering methods that we will use to work with the NGOs, to work with the refugees, to be able to gather all this content. And then so the tools will have to serve these methods. Then once the digital heritage content and narratives are gathered, we will curate this and we'll give a proper context. And thanks to the digital cultural heritage sharing tools, all these will have an expression in internet, and then with an enriched context. And we finally will use aggregation tools also, like the Memory Center project or the social media cloud, also to enrich all this content. This is the overall architecture. It's a high-level architecture. So basically, what it says is that, in a very synthetic way, that the interviews, workshops, and pilots will define the content that we will gather, and we will keep in the media set manager, the multimedia master, as I said, and then we'll have all these tools, sharing tools, basically, that will define several projects that we will co-create together with the cultural institutions and the refugee organizations. Okay, all this content will finally go in the bottom in the Memory Center project, and also this will involve the social media, semantic services, and crawlers. So talking specifically in the toolbox that we will give to cultural institutions, and one of the aims of the project, basically we have these gathering tools, okay, that will serve the co-creation methods, as I said before. It can be audiovisual software, the media set manager itself, and the devices to digitize, describe, and gather this content. And then we have the digital cultural heritage sharing tools, which are the developed with the cultural institutions and aligned with the communication strategies, okay, which give a really more extensive context to this content. An example of gathering tools that we will use we're planning to use in the workshops and in the pilots could be some of these. For example, here we have an example of other projects. I just mentioned some of them. Here's a 3D representation of a migrant backpack. It's made on 3D, and so this can really be a gathered content, and then we can add all this narrative to explain something really interesting based on this digital object. And then another project that it's a logbook, it's done by Severin Sajou, is another project that they really analyzed the content of the bag, not of this bag, of course, but the content of a migrant bag, what's inside. So this is also a good way to start a narrative. Here also a 360 degrees video will allow us to give this immersive perspective that we want to give to all what we do, because as you will see, we're looking for a really engaging experiences. So immersive content allows us also to have a more engaging status. And also, for example, this could be some of the content that we gather, which are pictures. In this case, is picture of the Barcelona bombings during the civil war. So we have like more recent content, but also some historical content, and that can be used. And these gathering tools will serve to digitize documents, image, audio, video, 3D. Will also give the workshops the tools to work properly, and even in the COVID period. And then also we have the media set manager, as I told you, to work with content, with digital content. This is the multimedia set manager we're planning to use, which is a semantic platform, open source, that will parameterize, we will adapt to the project to be able to work with different kinds of object formats like 3D, PowerPoints, etc. So it's completely interoperable. Also, we think it's one of the key parts of the project also. And then we arrived to the digital cultural heritage sharing tools. So basically, as you have seen, we've gathered like the digital object, can be a 3D representation, but now we have to give it the proper context. We have to express all the different perspectives also, because as it's been said in this morning, I mean, there are different perspectives also. There is not one only point of view. So all of this can be really gathered in the sharing tools. These sharing tools are basically have some qualities. They have to be accessible. They have to allow storytelling. Some of them will be really immersive. They have to promote engagement. Some of them will hybridize different contents, and also they will be interoperable and sustainable in order to be used after the project ends. So one of the examples, for example, is the web documentary. Here's an example of another project is the Migration Trail. They use, like in this case, a map, and they use that to explain the story of the migration along Europe. It's a very, very complex project. And then we have this other web doc, which is called Barcelona Under the Bombs, and really it's a very nice project. It explains exactly using maps where the bombs were striking, and then also the refugees that were made, and also these documents and interviews with people that have like links to that, etc. We are analyzing different kind of digital cultural heritage types, as you can see here. And we plan these so-close tools to be like hybridating different types. So, for example, as you see, we'll have a map together with different timelines and other types all together in one tool to enrich the narrative. So some keys to introduce the debate, and some things that many of us rely on social media to allow this content to reach a wider audience. So we have to overcome like echo chamber and filter bubble. There are two concepts. The echo chamber means people are always sharing, the same people are sharing the same kind of content, and there's like a bubble that we cannot break. And then we have the filter bubble, which is another problem that we are all experiencing now, which is the algorithms existing in websites and social media that choose what is interesting for you and what is not. So we think these are really hard barriers that we have to break in order to reach our people. So also, of course, we intend to be engaging, as I said. So we don't want only to give like intellectual or information, but I think we have to reach like all the dimensions of the person. We have to really be allowed to invocate like and move people to transformate with our messages. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Mark. I like this idea of the toolbox very much, and also the fact that you are talking about hybridating tools, different types of tools, which is very interesting. And this last slide was about sensing as receiving. And actually, it is interesting that sensing is introduced into a digital context. I think that this is one of the points I would like to raise as we go on, which is the relationship between the corporeal, the digital, the visual, hearing, and all of you have presented something more than the visual. You have presented visualizations, which is going a step forward. And perhaps it is for this, we'll discuss about this, but I was noticing that you have very suggestive acronyms or names, SPICE, Traction, La Tempesta, and this is also a type of visualization through certain words, metaphors. Yeah. But we'll pick up this discussion, but now it's time for the public to come in. I open the floor. Extraordinary sequence of papers. Who wants to intervene? Please go ahead. This is
Hello? Oh. No, Ana Maria, please go ahead.
Shall I go first? Because I have probably a question that is on everyone's mind, and it's a question for Miquel. And of course, it's a question of more details about how you are going to achieve the very, very challenging, very interesting project. So what are the tech specs, if you wish, of your work? And that's one question. I'm sure that those slides that you prepared will come in handy. And then the follow-up question is the question of the musical artistry. Again, probably because you collaborate with some of the operas, but the operas don't necessarily hire composers. So I was just curious, how would you, or where are the musicians or the music makers, the music composers coming into the project? So thank you very much.
Okay. I'm collecting questions. So please go ahead, Javier, and then you will reply.
Okay. Thank you so much for this panel. It was very, very interesting and also very touching for us as So Close project, because it is also very beautiful to see that the ideas about co-creation and about the emergency of new narratives through the use of, a meaningful use of technology. We were not alone in this. Indeed, we have this echo, in this case, a good echo from other projects. No, but my question is not a question for the panelists, but I would love to hear the opinion from Merlis and Roland about these presentations, because the objective for So Close, obviously, but also I have seen for the other two projects is to try to give voice to some of the peripheralized populations in Europe, such as migrants or refugees or poor people, poor population, etc., etc. So my question is also a question: how, as activists or people working in the field, would you appreciate a kind of technology or tools aiming to empower, aiming to transforming, aiming to create new narratives? That will be a question for other people, but related obviously to the presentations. Thank you.
Well, then, if Roland and Merlis accept this invitation, would you please be brief? Because we must also have it, give the word to other people in the public for this for this sequence of papers. So Merlis, do you want to intervene? Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. I don't know if you get my image or my voice, but I will try to say something.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. And I was really impressed with these presentations and examples, but I actually was thinking how you connect these wonderful ideas. I think art is healthy for everybody, and I experience this in my job. And I would like to know, how can the refugees, for example, that are a company, can access to this project or information? And after, if you consider some issues related to the educational level, if you consider issues related to the lack of access to internet, for example, that are the issues that I actually have now, when most of the communication and the socialization of people which I work have at the moment. That was my question, but I find it wonderful, the projects and these examples that you showed today.
Thank you. And I see Miguel has said something, but Miguel, or shall I give the word to Roland? Can you say something?
Yeah.
Give the word to Roland, and then I can ask a question.
Okay, no, I just have a brief something to say. The problem is one of the greatest problem in all this is that we have that difficulties to integrate, as we can say, in the educational system in some of the European countries. That's why I can say we are backward in that aspect, no? In the sense that some of us come from countries like countries that those who don't have, those countries that don't have that political bilateral or educational bilateral relationship with Spain, like where I'm living now in Barcelona. So we don't have that possibility to integrate our educational level in Cameroon with the educational level in Spain, which means we have to go back and start from behind. And there are many people in Spain, or as I can say, who comes from Africa, most of them have been in secondary schools and in high schools, some of them even in university. So the difficulties to go back to start in a secondary school, to some of them, that's one of the greatest problems. So that's why finally you find some of us in different ambits of association, no? of working systems also. So I think that's one of the greatest problems. If such problem can be reduced or can be solved in one way or the other, for us Africans also to be able to integrate in the educational system here without going right back like what they are presenting to us, then I think there will be a change in touch. I think that's
Thank you. Thank you very much. So is there anybody else from the audience who wants to pose a comment or a question? No? Can I just add something? I was raising earlier on the question of the relationship between hearing and sight combined with the written, as you are doing with your visualizations. And perhaps this could be a topic on which we can all reflect, and you, for instance, Michael, could show the slide that you didn't show to us earlier on, if it is pertinent to this general problem, the relationship between the word and the digital world. And I also would like to ask you, particularly Michael, but all of you, whether you are familiar with some experiences that are being done in Italy by groups of migrants. One is the Orchestra di Piazza Vittorio, which is composed of migrants to Rome from all parts of the world, Brazil, Tunisia, and Italians too. and they have put up recently a Don Giovanni by Mozart, but completely redesigned. And Don Giovanni is a woman and is a gay woman, but it's not a vindication of homosexuality. It is an attack against heteronormativity and against xenophobia. And the other experience is the opera camion meaning truck. This is a truck that goes around the peripheries, and when they come to a square, they just open up the truck and mount the show, and people in the evening not only see the mounting of the show, but also the show itself. So these experiences are trying to go in the direction, not only the direction that Michele indicated, but I think also Mark and Paul, in the sense of opening up a genre, different genres, and giving the genre to people who can change it and reorganize it. So things are moving in the directions that you indicated. And we will be very grateful if you can reply to some of these stimuli that we have given you, starting perhaps from Paul.
Yes, I think one thing that I'd like to pick up on there is the importance of visualization. And for example, within SPICE, we're collecting responses, kind of interpretations from different people, and we want to visualize them, the kind of aggregation of those back to people in a productive way. And you find that many of the ways that information tends to be visualized tends to kind of close down different interpretations, tends to cut off a lot of the complexity. A lot of visualizations just tend to be, okay, there's a difference in average between these two groups, and it's all about kind of differences and simplification rather than looking at the kind of richness and complexity. And I think this is the kind of visualizations that we need, are kind of richer and kind of more complex and can show similarities. I think these are the sorts of visualizations we need in this type of projects.
Right, and I was thinking now about terminology that you use this expression, citizen curation. It seems to me very telling, because it includes, at least it does in the etymology, the idea of care, doesn't it?
Yes, that's right. I mean, basically, the origin of curation is to care for things, and but we thought very carefully about the kind of choice of term in order to give the right impression. And kind of some of the discussions we've been having is that we're thinking of curation as kind of caring for objects, but also for kind of caring for communities, and using objects and people's responses to objects as a way of kind of building communities and building connections between people.
Right. I see this discourse you are making against the background of a crisis of curators and a great movement of curators who are against the power of a few famous curators of the world who decide, you're talking about museums, you're talking about art galleries, who decide who should become important as an artist. And very often these sort of caucus of curators excludes artists from Africa or Asia or Latin America. So there is a sort of movement among artists in these directions. But I would now go to Michele, if you please.
Okay, hello. I will try to Well, there were a lot of interactions and then a lot of very nice discussion aspects. So I will try to summarize my answer and try to answer all of them. So if I forget something, just please remind me. So you mentioned some very interesting initiatives in Italy. I mean, you talked about the representations of Don Giovanni and so on. I have more a technological background, but I'm sure that in the consortium we have experts like Francois Matarazzo. That it's he's been working in participatory art and so on a lot, and I'm learning a lot with him, because we are creating this advisory team for international advisory team, also local advisory teams. We are doing a lot of interaction with people all across Europe and worldwide, that they are doing this kind of community art approaches. So there are really very interesting things, and I'm learning a lot in that experience. You mentioned also an opera camion and a track, and that's something similar that we want to do in Ireland, like with Irish National Opera, creating something that could be movable and we could go across Ireland with, for example, head-mounted displays or something like that, and have a completely novel format, digital capsule or something like that, and to experience this, without an opera theater in a small town, but go with your track and have this kind of experiences. So this is something that we have in mind, that we are still designing and thinking how it would be, but it's something, a reference that we would like to at least to explore. And you also mentioned something about the composers and so on. So I did not say that, but in the three different trials that we have, they are very, very different trials. I mean, there are like forces in the trials, like some of them more related to have an artistic outcome. Like, for example, Liceo, they want to do a representation with this community opera, which is going to be in their grand theater in the production season. I mean, it's going to be one more production as the others. So for the artistic part, for them is very, very important. So, for example, the composers and the libretto and so on, they are professionals driving that that process, talking to the neighbors, talking to the different things, and they are, but let's say it's very professional driven. And then there will be other processes, like, for example, how the costumes are going to be, or how the branding of the opera is going to be, like how the leaflets, how the image and the logos of the opera and so on, that are going to be more, let's say, in the level of co-creation, with more involvement of the non-professional participants in that aspect. But for example, in there, the forces between, in the range of co-creation, being more driven by the professionals, or being more driven by the communities or individuals, it's going to be more in the artistic part. But for example, in SAMP and in Portugal, their more relevant thing is the social part. So they are thinking in a model where they contacted some composers. I think they are 7, but I'm not completely sure. But let's say more than 5, or between 5 and 10 composers, and they are completely open to discuss who the composer is going to be, or even if there's going to be more than one composer, and how the forces between the professional composer and the community members, the inmates and so on, and how this co-creation is going to be. And they want to start discussing from the very beginning, how the forces are going to be, how the interactions are going to be, and not to decide things before reaching an agreement between the community. So we see that in co-creation, there is a whole range of co-creation. What does it mean? And it's a very interesting discussion, and what is true co-creation and what is more being like a consultancy with different people and so on. So in that range, we have these trials that are going to be very different from one to each other, and that's going to allow us to explore the advantages and the complications and the limitations of each one of the things. So I have also the technical specifications, or at least a first idea of the design of the different tools that we are going to create. If you want, I can share the screens there and the slides. There are 3 slides, so it's not a lot. I will try to do that and explain very, very briefly. Okay, I guess you are watching it. One of them is what we call a media vault. The names, we still have to work better in those names, but it's a tool that will enable participants to work in that co-creation process. So it's going to be a kind of media repository with videos, with 360 videos, with audios, with any kind of content that will store that, and that will enable and foster a conversational dialogue between the different participants. So, for example, I can be one of the members of the community and create myself a video explaining, I don't know, how I am doing the costumes and the ideas I have, or how I envision a specific part of the opera. I can have professionals also pushing that their content that could be more training content about how, I don't know, a singer has to sing or prepare the voice, so then others can learn for that. And we want to enable a very rich interaction between them, so creating metadata, linked information, so then when a user comes to the platform, from all the content that you have in the repository, so you can go directly to the parts where you are interested, doing summarization of the content that there is, doing enrich search of the content and something like that. And so to be able to coordinate different teams, to know each other what we are doing, so all the people know what's happening in that co-creation and can have these relations between the different groups and the different parts and the disciplines that are involved in the opera. On the other hand, yes?
Excuse me, Mikel. Can you be briefer for if you still have to?
Very brief.
Because
the second one
have Mark.
Okay, I completely agree. The second one is more for the representation itself. I mean, thinking in a traditional representation, how to enhance that with technology. Like, for example, having some displays in the stage and having some remote people, and how to connect people that are remote and putting them in the stage and creating a real-time communication. So that's very briefly. And the third one is more about how to create all digital capsules. So in these representations could be extending with technology traditional representation, or having completely separate dome-like place, or with head-mounted displays and things like that. So okay, I will not give more information at the moment. So that's that.
Thank you for your generous attitude. And Mark, you have the last word.
Yes, thank you, Luisa. Yes, regarding what Mr. Roland Fosso mentioned before, I totally agree that the educational side of what we are doing is paramount to reach the social transformation. And the good news in this sense is that digital cultural heritage sharing tools have really an educational dimension. It's pretty easy to adapt them to the educational content and to make them become an educational resource, like giving guidelines to the teachers to use these in classrooms. And in this sense, they are very, very important primary sources of information, enriched information that can be easily translated into educational resources. In this sense, we are optimistical, and you absolutely agree with Mr. Fosso's observations. And also regarding what's been said about the digital gap that can exist in some of these user communities, and specifically in refugees communities, we've been also doing our research and also talking, and then we realized how important is the mobile smartphone, and for all the refugees, it's like very, very key device. So we're planning to use the mobile as a part of the co-creation process, the own mobile of the participants on the workshops, etc., etc. And some of the tools, for example, the scanner will be the mobile itself, the 3D scanner. If we define to use the scanner, it will be in the mobile itself. And then, also we are planning like to use like also 360-degree video, which is an immersive content, because, as Luisa said before, engagement is very important, and immersion and engagement are really, really close concepts. So we really hope to reach people through these technologies also. So as I mentioned, also social media is important, and we rely also in the communication strength of our partners. We think also that the refugees also that participate in the workshop, they will feel the project like their own project. They will help us also to communicate this. Social media is so important. So in this case, to communicate, to make the awareness. So yes, that's mainly what I wanted to comment.
Well, thanks so much to all three of you, Paul, Mikel, and Mark, for sharing so much with us. And thanks also to the participants for their attention and interventions. So I can close this session in time, saying that it is a consolation to have met at least virtually. I think I am very, very grateful because since sight and hearing are part of the corporeal, we have been in touch during this day and a half. And this is something that I really appreciate. So thank you for your attention, and I pass the floor again to Miguel.
Okay, thank you, Luisa. Thank you, all the participants and all the people that have intervened in this session, but also in the other two sessions that we have had this morning and we had yesterday. And now, in order to just make a little bit of sum up and pose some concluding remarks, I'm going to give the floor to Javier Rodrigo, which is the principal investigator of So Close, and which is the person in charge of the So Close project, and that has intervened in many sessions, so you all know them. So Javier, whenever you want, just to sum up and to conclude this virtual conference.
Yes, thank you so much, Miguel. Thank you for introducing me like somebody that speaks a lot, which is completely true, and I accept that. And I would like to thank everyone, people that has intervened in the three panels, and also the people attending the conference, both in this virtual place, which is the Microsoft Teams, but also in the YouTube streaming. Just to remind you that this the recordings of the sessions will be available both in the YouTube channel from So Close project, and also in the So Close web page that Miguel is going to write in a moment in the chat. Okay. My concluding remarks are going to be very brief. Are going to move in three terms, fundamentally in the terms of conceptualization, and methodology and tools, but very briefly, of course, because one of the elements, of the key elements that have raised in this conference is the importance of conceptualization. Obviously, we are dealing with an issue, with a problem that is incredibly relevant in European history and present. We have to keep in mind that it is not only a matter of the last 10 years in the so-called refugee crisis of the 1 million refugees in Europe coming from the outside frontiers from Europe. We have to keep in mind that Europe has a long history of forced displacement and therefore refugee phenomenon, dealing with many previous experiences, for instance, wars, genocides, ethno-national cleanships. We have to keep in mind that, for instance, only civil wars since 1945, so since the end of the Second World War, has created a guess number of about 65 million refugees worldwide, and we don't know how many of them are in Europe or came out from Europe. So the conceptualization is fundamental, as Professor Philip Cher mentioned yesterday. It is very important to focus on the backgrounds, so wars, genocide, political persecution, but also and mostly in the concept itself of the refugee, because the reason is very simple, is that an accurate concept will be the best tool for the analysis of the past-present perspective. We have to try to stick to a shared concept in order to develop a good analysis that will be fundamental for the development also of the analytical tools and also of the technological tools of the project. About the method, the methodology of the project is clearly, and it has been said many times in this conference, is comparison. But also keeping in mind, as Luisa Pacerini was mentioning yesterday, that comparison is not to melt, it's not to fuse narratives, but to confront them, to accept the differences and the complexities, and also to accept the conflict. This is something that has been crystal clear from the sociologist panel from this morning. And about the tools, as it has been said in the last incredible panel about the technologies, the tools have to be accessible, have to be creative, has to be dynamic, and have to respond to a big element, which is the empowerment. I think this is one key concept that maybe was not present in one decade ago projects, but the social use of our projects have to go in the direction of the empowerment of the actors we are dealing with. We are not dealing with passive actors, but we are dealing with active subjects. And this is one big conclusion, I think, from the three panels from yesterday and from today. So, in order to conclude, clearly the idea of the interdisciplinarity is fundamental, has been fundamental since the very beginning of So Close, and it's also fundamental for the development of any kind of big scale research projects like this, like So Close. The idea of the storytelling and the narrative and the personal and individual and collective storytelling and narratives are like the key concept that we have to stick to in the development of So Close. A storytelling that is not, as I was saying before, an homogenization of narratives, but the acceptance of the conflict of the narratives. And one other word, one of the biggest objectives of this project, and also from other projects such as Spice and Traction, is to list. And this is quite a new thing for us as scientists, as an academics. We are very used and very comfortable with our limited framework of academic research, like doing books and papers. But we are supposed also to act and also to list. And this is the idea, the main idea that lies behind the So Close project. So Close project will end in the end of 2022. But afterwards, there will be the memory center platform, there will be the tools, there will be the ongoing and continuous growth of the tools and all the results of the use of these tools and of this memory center platform afterwards, and after nobody remembers about the So Close project. So this is it. I am very happy about how this conference has been going on, despite the difficulties dealing with the conference, dealing with the virtual space dealing with the COVID pandemic. I would like to thank a lot to Miguel Alonso, who has been the coordinator of the technical, academic, and every kind of things about this conference. And one last thing, our colleagues from Bangladesh Association in Poland, who are in charge of the dissemination and communication program of So Close, ask us if you could please open your video, open your camera, all of you, in order to have a final hello, a final salute, a final goodbye, a final farewell, in order to take a last picture of some of us, because unfortunately, I think that this program doesn't allow us to have like all of us together, but at least some of us like being able to see each other's face and being able to make a farewell that hopefully next time will be a real one, present one, and in a real space and not in a virtual space. So this is all. Thank you so much. It has been really a pleasure, and see you next time. It has been really a pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Thank you all. Bye.
Bye bye bye. You can also open the mic if you want to say bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Thanks very
Goodbye.
much. Thank you very much. Bye next time.
Bye. Bye.